What's up? I'm back for another Inside the Loop. On this one, I'm going to talk about a recent placement I got on MTV's The Real World, season 31, episode 12. Last week, the publisher reached out to me, Lab Hits, shout out to them, and they were just like, yo, they used some of your music. So I was excited, it was like dope, and so pretty much I'm here to break down the track. This time, I'm going to do something a little different and break down my mixing process, different plugins that I use when I mix, how I mix music pretty much. So let's dig into it and you'll get an inside look of my mixing process for music that I, shop out to TV, film, artists, what have you. So let's go. Okay, so here we have the track Crazy that was placed recently. As you can see, it's not a whole lot to the track. Drums, which are summed up under a drum master track. Strings, hits, brass, a synth sound, a synth bass, a riser, and then another little synth sound. And that's it. So what I like to do when I start out mixing the track, two main elements that I start with, and usually that's pretty much it for me, is the compressor, which is that thing right there, and then an EQ. Those are like the two biggest things for me when mixing a track. So I'll have that on all of my sounds pretty much, with an exception of brass and my bass here. In this case, the brass, I added like a guitar amp to kind of add some distortion and thicken it up and kind of give it a different sound. So I just experiment from time to time with different weird stuff like that. And then the bass, I throw max bass, which is waves as well, and then use the Dies Bassum preset, which it adds a really nice rounded bass and thickness to the bass. So I use that on those, and then everything else is pretty much compression and EQ. And then a synth sound, I had a filter on it, which was automated. As you can see here, this green line here is the automation for this one knob, which is a lifesaver. So when I start mixing, once I have those plugins in place, I turn all of my sounds down. So pretty much everything over here is going to be turned completely down or muted. And then I go over here and I focus on the drums, which are under this master drum track here. So I have a kick, a couple kicks, few snares, snare roll, clap, hi-hat, perks, and a crash. So EQ wise, if it's not a kick, I'm gonna roll off on the low end. For example, this snare here is rolled off around 79-80 hertz, and that clears up all the low end, so you don't have that muddy sound in the low end. And I keep my kick lows in, I keep my bass lows in. Everything else I just clean up and roll off. Even on my like my synth sounds and everything, as you can see, everything is rolled off. This one, I did weird things with that one right there. So yeah, so that's my drums. When I start mixing, everything is turned down. I start with my kick, make sure the kicks are how I want them to be and they're hitting together how I want them to hit. Then I'll introduce the snare, and then I'll start introducing the hi-hats and perks and crashes and things like that. And then once I get the drums solid and how I want them to hit, I'll go ahead and add this SSL compressor onto the master drum track, and then that kind of glues the drums together and gets them sounding tight. So after that, I start to introduce the sounds. I always start with the bass first, slowly introduce that into the mix, make sure it's hitting and complementing the kick. And once that bass is good, I'll go in and start with maybe like my main synth sound, which is usually centered, and then I'll introduce the other sounds, which I pan either left or right, and then slowly introduce each one by one into the mix until it sounds the way I want it to sound. Once everything is tight for the most part, I'll go ahead to my stereo master track, and I'll add this beast of a plugin by PSP, which is the master compressor, and I use the Fat Mix preset, and that pretty much glues the whole track together, makes it sound really nice, and I pretty much put that on a pre-master and bounce out what I call the rough version, which is pretty much ready for mastering. It has headroom and everything, and that's why my stereo volume is so low. I try and keep it around that 8.5 mark, negative 8.5 mark, so that, you know, when it's being mastered, it has headroom, so it's not clipping and sounding crazy distorted. And that's pretty much the mixing process behind this record and a lot of other records that I do, that's been placed on TV and artists and things like that.